I thought I was just taking a night shift to pay off some college debt. Nothing more than guarding a dark, empty mall until morning. No interviews, no paperwork, just a strange voice on the phone telling me to show up at 10 p.m. sharp. But the moment the doors locked behind me, I realized this wasn't a job, it was a trap. And the rules taped to the desk, they weren't guidelines, they were warnings. I was already 3 months behind on rent, 2 on utilities, and drowning in loan payments that came in like waves, crashing before I could breathe. I was a college student scraping by on borrowed time and instant noodles. No family, no safety net, just the silent pressure of debt pushing down harder each day. I had sold my laptop, my guitar, even my blood, and still it wasn't enough. I spent every evening scrolling through online job boards, anything, anywhere. I didn't care. I just needed something fast. And one night, around 7:40 p.m., I saw an ad I hadn't seen before. It was at the very bottom of a page I had refreshed 100 times, like it had just appeared. Simple text, plain font, night shift security, Mall Center West, start tonight. Call now, no salary listed, no details, just a number. I hesitated, then tapped it. The call picked up before it even rang, and a voice, male, calm, quiet, answered with only one word. Yes. I introduced myself, stammering, said I was calling about the job. The voice didn't ask for my name, resume, or even age, just said, be at the back entrance at 10 p.m. Your shift begins then. Before clicking off, I stared at the phone for a long time moment, the screen cold in my hand, the voice still ringing in my ears. It didn't sound robotic, but it didn't sound normal either. It was like someone mimicking emotion, but getting it slightly wrong. Still, I had no choice. So I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my backpack, and left. The mall was about a 20-minute ride from my apartment, but I got there early. The area was mostly empty. A long, dead row of businesses surrounded by nothing but concrete and silence. I found the back entrance easily. A narrow metal door near a loading dock, a dim yellow light above it flickering like a dying eye. At exactly 10 p.m., the door opened and a man stepped out. Tall, in his 50s maybe, wearing a dark overcoat over a shirt that looked one size too big. He didn't introduce himself, didn't shake my hand, just looked me up and down and said, "Good, follow me." Inside, the halls were cold, too clean, the kind of sterile that feels like something is being hidden. We passed through a few empty corridors before reaching a small office tucked between 2 shuttered storage rooms. Inside were 4 monitors, a desk, a single chair, and a Polaroid camera. The man gestured to the monitors and said, "You'll take a photo of each screen at the start of every hour, don't question it." I asked about keys, access, anything else, but he cut me off. "You don't leave this room unless something changes. If you see movement in the West Wing, go there. Otherwise, stay seated." Then he turned and left, just like that. No instructions, no paperwork. The door clicked shut behind him, and I was alone. The monitors hummed softly, each showing a different section of the mall, mostly hallways and entrances, all empty. The clock on the wall read 10:15 p.m. I sat in the chair, heart thudding, trying to calm myself, telling myself it was just a weird job, nothing more. But then I heard footsteps, slow and echoing, not from the hall, but inside the office. I turned, and there she was, a woman in a cleaner's uniform, pushing a cart, humming softly. Her eyes never met mine. She just moved to the side of the room, opened a drawer in the filing cabinet, and pulled out a folded paper. She placed it on the desk beside me and said, "He never tells them about the rules." Her voice was soft, tired, but her smile never touched her eyes. I tried to ask her name, but she was already walking away, humming that same slow tune. By the time I reached the door and looked out, the hallway was empty again, like she had dissolved into the air. I returned to the desk, hands shaking, and unfolded the paper. It was handwritten in red ink, slightly smudged, but still legible. Rule 1. Do not speak to anyone after 11:11 p.m. Rule 2. If you hear footsteps above you, do not look up. Rule 3. If you see another guard, do not acknowledge him. There is no other guard. Rule 4. Take a Polaroid photo of each monitor at the top of every hour. Keep them in the top left drawer. Rule 5. If the cleaning woman returns, ask her nothing. Do not follow her. Rule 6. If you wake up and the monitors are off, do not attempt to turn them on. Hide. I read the rules twice, 3 times, each word sinking into my skin like ice water. I looked up at the monitors again, and for the first time, I noticed one of the screens had flickered, just once, like a glitch. I took the camera and snapped a photo of it. The picture developed slowly. I watched the white square darken into a grainy image of the south corridor, and there, standing beneath the security camera, was a tall figure in a long overcoat, looking straight up into the lens, mouth wide open like he was screaming. Though no sound came through, I checked the live monitor again, but the hallway was empty, completely empty. I put the photo in the drawer and shut it, my hands colder than before. The clock hit 10:59 p.m. and I waited. The rules in front of me, the door behind me, and the mall all around, breathing, waiting, watching. The clock ticked over to 11 p.m. and I felt my throat tighten, the kind of anxiety that feels like something unseen is already pressing its hands against your spine. I held the camera and took another photo of the monitors like the rules instructed. The images developed slowly. The same halls, empty, silent, lifeless, except one, the east corridor, which showed a figure halfway in frame, blurry, like it was caught mid-movement, almost like it didn't belong there, like the camera was trying to forget it was ever real. I blinked hard and looked at the live feed, but it was clean again. Nothing moving, nothing present. I tucked the new photos in the top left drawer and shut it slowly. The hum of the monitors was louder now, or maybe my ears were ringing. I checked the time again, 11:04 p.m., and then I heard footsteps. They were soft at first, distant, like someone pacing down the corridor outside the office. But I remembered the Rule 2. If you hear footsteps above you, do not look up. And that's when I noticed something strange. The sound wasn't coming from the hall. It was coming from above the ceiling tiles, like someone walking upside down across the tiles right above my head, pacing slowly, purposefully, circling directly over where I sat. I froze in the chair, staring at the wall in front of me, every muscle in my body screaming to glance upward, but I didn't. I couldn't. The sound continued for nearly a minute, then stopped directly above me, and for a second, just one awful second, I could hear shallow breathing dripping through the ceiling like oil. Then silence. My breathing came in short bursts, my hands trembling in my lap. I didn't dare move. The monitors buzzed again, and one of them flickered. The south corridor this time, the same one from before. The hallway looked distorted, the colors wrong, like someone had twisted the feed through a bad filter. Then something moved past the edge of the screen, not walking, not crawling, but something in between, a shape that didn't fit a human form, long limbs that didn't bend right, and I knew I had to go out there. The man said if anything moved in the west wing, I had to check it. I stared at the hallway on the screen, every part of me rejecting the idea, but I couldn't just sit there. The weight in the air was unbearable, so I stood slowly, grabbed the ring of old keys hanging near the desk, and stepped into the hallway. The sound of the door clicking shut behind me echoed too loudly. The hallway outside was darker than it should have been, like the lights had dimmed themselves in anticipation. I moved down the corridor, past closed storefronts with mannequins that looked too lifelike. Some facing out, some inexplicably turned toward the walls, like they were ashamed of something. The echo of my own footsteps didn't match the way I walked, like something else was mimicking them just a beat behind. I reached the west wing, the hall narrowing, the air colder, And then I saw movement ahead. A flicker of a shape ducking behind a corner near an old boutique store. I hesitated, remembered Rule 3. If you see another guard, do not acknowledge him. There is no other guard. My mouth went dry. I turned the corner, and sure enough, there was someone standing at the far end of the hallway. Same uniform as mine, same build, same everything, except he wasn't moving right. He was swaying slightly like he was drunk or broken, his face in shadow. And then he lifted his hand and waved at me. Not a normal wave, a slow, too long gesture. I backed away without responding. Turned and walked fast, not running. I didn't want to look panicked. But every instinct told me, if I broke into a sprint, he would follow. And I knew he wouldn't walk. He would crawl or slide or gallop, something unnatural. I reached the office door and yanked it open, shut it behind me and leaned against it, heart pounding. The room felt different now, colder, tighter, like it had shrunk while I was gone. The monitors flickered again and the center one went black for 2 seconds, then returned with a view of the main atrium. But the decorations had changed. There were now long red streamers hanging from the ceiling that hadn't been there before, and beneath them was a circle of chairs, all facing inward, all empty except one. And in that chair sat the cleaning woman from before, head bowed, humming the same awful tune. I stepped back from the desk, heart racing. She looked up directly into the camera, directly into me, and her smile was wide, too wide, lips stretching across her face like someone had pulled them with hooks. The screen glitched and returned to normal. The streamers gone, the circle gone, just an empty mall again. I looked at the paper still on the desk, the rules slightly crumpled now, and I realized the red ink had started to smear at the edges like it was bleeding. I checked the time, 11:11 p.m., and then I heard the door handle click behind me. Not open, just click, slow, deliberate. Someone on the other side testing it gently. I remembered Rule 1, do not speak to anyone after 11:11 p.m. I didn't make a sound, just stared at the door, willing it to stay closed. The handle turned again, then stopped, then silence. I backed away toward the desk, sat down slowly, and took another photo, 11:15 p.m. The picture developed faster this time, like it knew what it had to show. The image was of me sitting at the desk, but in the reflection of the monitor behind me, just barely visible, was a face peeking out from behind the door frame, mouth open, eyes empty, and I hadn't seen anyone, hadn't heard anyone come in. I turned around in the chair slowly. The office was still empty, just me and the monitors, and the whispering, now from the ceiling vents, a language I didn't know but understood in some awful way, like it was naming me, calling me by a name I hadn't heard in years. The whispering didn't stop. It grew more rhythmic, like chanting, a distorted choir of dry voices weaving through the vents above me. Too many to count, all speaking in unison, yet slightly offbeat, like a corrupted echo. I held my breath and pressed my hands to my ears, but it didn't matter. The sound wasn't entering through sound. It was in my head now, bleeding into my thoughts, rewriting them, reshaping them. I opened my eyes and stared at the monitors, but the cameras had shifted. All of them now showed the same hallway, the one just outside this room, and in each of them stood the cleaning woman, frozen in place, facing away from the camera like she was listening for something. I reached for the walkie-talkie on the desk, desperate to call someone, anyone. But the second I lifted it, I remembered Rule 4, do not use the radio unless it speaks to you first, and that's when I saw it, the red light blinking. Even though I hadn't pressed the button, I raised it slowly, terrified, and brought it close to my ear, and a voice whispered through it. Not mine, not a stranger's, but my mother's voice, long dead. Her soft tone calling my name the same way she used to when I was small and scared. Her voice warm and loving, but buried beneath it was something else, something laughing. I dropped the walkie instantly and it cracked against the floor. The sound of it echoed unnaturally through the office, stretching longer than it should have, and then all the monitors cut to black except one. The central screen showed the food court now, But it wasn't empty. The lights were dimmed like a storm had rolled inside, and in the center of the food court was a large figure sitting on a table. Too large to be human, limbs like tree trunks, skin slick like wet rubber, and where its head should be was just a mirror, perfectly round, reflecting nothing. Not the mall, not the cameras, only void. I leaned in against my will, hypnotized, and in that mirror I saw something impossible. Not my reflection, but the back of my own head, like it was staring at me from behind. I spun in the chair, but there was nothing there, just the humming from before, that cursed tune rising again from the vents and from somewhere else deeper inside the mall. I stood quickly, too quickly, and stumbled into the doorframe, the pain real, grounding me for a moment. But then I saw the paper on the desk again, the rules. Only now the ink was pulsing, letters crawling, and a new line had been added at the bottom. Rule 7. If the woman speaks to you, do not answer. I never wrote that. I never saw that rule before. And I knew deep down she was coming. I moved toward the door but hesitated. I didn't know if she was waiting just outside. I leaned close and listened, but heard only faint breathing. Not my own. Low and gurgling like lungs filled with water. Then the lights above the desk flickered, and I turned back to the monitors, and the woman was no longer on the screens. The halls were empty again, except for one movement in the very back of the center. Something crawling across the floor like it didn't have bones. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped into the hallway. The lights above buzzed in protest as I moved deeper, the mall groaning like it was alive and aware of me. I passed stores I didn't remember seeing earlier. One looked like an old record shop, even though I was sure there hadn't been one here for years. The glass window fogged from the inside, and I saw shadows moving just beyond it, tapping on the glass in slow sync with my footsteps. I reached the food court, and the air shifted, colder, heavier, like I was walking into the lungs of some buried beast. The tables were overturned now, the chairs gone, and in the center where the figure had been was now a circle of salt, cracked and broken, like someone had disturbed something sealed. I remembered the photo from earlier, the one with the circle of chairs. I realized now it hadn't been an image of the past, but a warning of the present. Something was loose now, unshackled, and I heard her voice, the cleaning woman, behind me, whispering my name, soft, pleading, full of grief. I froze and my throat tightened. I remembered the new rule. I wasn't supposed to answer her. I bit my tongue and turned my back to the voice, walking slowly toward the emergency exit at the far end of the court. But it led to a wall now, not a door, just smooth plaster like the mall had rearranged itself. Her footsteps came closer behind me, slow and dragging like she was hurt or tired or ancient. I turned back, and she was standing 20 feet away, eyes black and sunken, mouth trembling, hands stretched toward me holding the list of rules. She didn't speak, but her eyes begged me to take it. I stared at her, my body screaming to run, but I didn't move. Then she dropped the paper and began to melt, her skin sloughing off in pieces like wet paper, her bones cracking inward like they were being pulled into her chest. And then she was gone. Just a pile of rags and salt and teeth. I screamed and backed away into something hard and cold. And when I turned, I was back in the security office, the door closing behind me without sound, the clock now reading 12:07 a.m., my head spinning, my hands covered in dirt or ash. I stumbled to the desk and looked at the photo camera, but it was gone, replaced by a small black book with my name carved into it. I opened it, and inside were drawings, sketches of every event I had seen tonight, drawn in my own handwriting, my own style, as if I had been recording it from outside my own body. And at the back of the book was one sentence written over and over again in red ink. You were warned. I stared at the red ink, bleeding across the final page of that book. The words "you were warned" etched again and again, like a chant or a curse. My heart thundered in my chest, but it wasn't fear alone anymore. Something heavier pressed down on me, something darker, like the air itself had grown thick with despair. I couldn't remember the last time I'd blinked or even breathed right. It was like time inside the mall had slipped off the tracks. I stepped back from the desk and my foot crunched something on the floor. Not glass, not plastic, but bone. A small brittle rib like one from a child, and beside it, a single eyeball staring blankly at the ceiling, as if it had been watching everything with me. I rushed to the door, but the hallway beyond was gone now. In its place stood a corridor of mirrors, each one reflecting me, but slightly wrong, too tall or too short, or with eyes missing, or mouths too wide. Some versions moved when I didn't, their hands raised in warning or in plea. I tried to turn back, but the office door was no longer behind me, just more mirrors stretching endlessly in both directions. I began to walk, forcing myself forward, my reflection in each mirror, whispering things I couldn't hear clearly until one finally screamed, "Rule 2. Do not speak to your reflection after midnight." I froze. The time was past midnight. Now the mall had passed the threshold into something else. The night had truly begun. I kept my eyes forward, trying not to look too long at any one mirror, but I saw one of them move, and not like the others. This one stepped out of the mirror, its surface stretching like liquid glass as it emerged, wearing my face exactly, but wrong. Its smile was too calm, its eyes too hollow, and it whispered, "I broke the rule for you, and now you owe me." It lunged, and I ran crashing through the mirrors, which shattered, but didn't cut me. Instead, they screamed like people dying. And suddenly I was back in the food court, but it had changed again. Now the lights above flickered like lightning, and the walls were covered in photographs, all black and white, and all showing me staring directly at the camera, with something behind me in every one. A shadow, tall and thin, and always closer than the last. The speakers above crackled, and a child's lullaby began to play, warped and slowed like a record melting. I looked around and realized I wasn't alone. Something was sitting at one of the tables, a man or a mannequin. No, a thing dressed in an old mall Santa costume, its head drooped forward as if asleep. I stepped closer against my better judgment and saw that the beard was real. Not fake, not synthetic, but actual human hair. The eyes behind the glasses were open, bloodshot, and dry, and it said in a voice that sounded like a dying engine, "Sit down, son. Your shift ain't over yet." I backed away, but all the tables around me scraped across the floor, spinning and forming a circle, trapping me inside. And in the center was that same salt ring, now lit with flames blue and cold. The Santa stood slowly, his joints cracking like old wood, and his smile split his cheeks, revealing teeth too long, too many. I closed my eyes and shouted no. And when I opened them again, I was in the arcade, the machines all lit up but playing themselves screens, flashing scoreboards, counting up but no players until I saw the silhouettes, small child-sized shadows dancing between the machines, and one by one the games began speaking my name in different voices, some soft, some screaming. And I remembered, Rule 6, do not enter the arcade if the machines are already on. I was already inside. I backed up toward the door, but it vanished, and the carpet beneath me rippled like skin. And then I saw the game in the corner. The only one not lit. It was shaped like a coffin, upright with my own face printed on the screen. A message below said, "Insert soul to play." I turned and ran into the darkness past the food court, past the shops, but everything had changed. The stores were old, now filled with dust and rot. Mannequins decayed their faces, torn off or painted with human expressions, their eyes glass, but crying real tears. I found a restroom door and locked myself inside. Trying to breathe, the lights inside flickered weakly, and in the mirror, I saw my own reflection, watching me. Except it was smiling and I wasn't. I heard the cleaning woman's voice again behind me, soft and broken. "You must finish it. You must stay until it's done." I turned, and there she was, whole again, but pale, almost see-through, and she held out the list of rules again. But this time, her fingers were missing, and her face had no mouth. Just 2 wet holes where her eyes used to be. The rules changed as I read them, each word shifting like ink bleeding into new warnings. Rule 8. If you survive past 3 a.m., do not fall asleep. And Rule 9. If the lights go out entirely, hide your face and pray. I looked up and all the lights went out at once. Not a flicker, not a buzz, just dead silence and blackness complete and total, and I knew I had seconds to move. I dropped to the floor, curled into myself and covered my face, my ears filling with static. And then the breathing started from just above me, like someone inches from my head, sniffing me, tasting my fear. The darkness pressed into me like fingers trying to pierce skin, and then a voice whispered from inside my own mind, "He sees you now and he is coming." And then the lights blinked back on, and I was back in the office, but everything was decayed. The monitors were smashed, the desk burned, and the clock read 3:33 a.m. And the list of rules was nailed to the wall with a knife carved into the wood beneath it was one more rule. Rule 10. You will not be allowed to leave until you understand why you were chosen. The clock didn't move no matter how long I stared at it, the second hand frozen at 3:33 a.m., as if time itself had given up and the room felt heavier, the air too still, the lights too dim, the shadows pressing in like a living thing. I turned from the broken monitors and saw that the paper with the rules was bleeding red ink, seeping from the words like open wounds. Rule 10. You will not be allowed to leave until you understand why you were chosen. I didn't understand anything. I never asked for this job. I never wanted any of this. And yet somehow everything felt made for me. Like the mall had shaped itself around my fears. Like it had studied me long before I walked through its doors. I looked down at my name carved into the desk, freshly etched like it had always been there. And beneath it more names, all crossed out. Some carved so deep, they split the wood. I stood up slowly, and the floor beneath me groaned like something old shifting beneath the surface. And when I opened the door to leave the office, I wasn't in the hallway anymore. I was in the toy store, the same one I had seen earlier, but now every shelf was lined with dolls and stuffed animals all facing me. Their eyes wide and wet, their smiles sewn too tightly, like they were barely holding in screams. One of the dolls blinked, I'm sure of it, and another one turned its head, just slightly following my movement. I remembered the rules, but none of them mentioned this store. Nothing warned me about the toys. I backed away slowly and heard the sound of a music box, playing from deeper inside, a high-pitched melody off-key and slow. I followed it against my will until I saw it. A child's carousel spinning slowly in the center of the store. But the horses weren't horses. They were something else, crawling things with too many limbs, with faces stretched into silent agony, and riding one of them was the cleaning woman. Her body rigid, her eyes rolled back, her arms reaching out to me as she spun in circles, her mouth opening wide, even though she had no mouth. And I heard her voice in my head, repeating the same phrase again and again. Wake up before he wakes up. Wake up before he wakes up. I stumbled back and the carousel stopped. Suddenly, all the lights in the store shut off, and in the black, I felt something grip my wrist, cold and thin like bone, but soft like skin. And then the lights returned, and I was alone again. But the dolls had moved now, sitting on the floor surrounding me as if watching a show. I ran tripping over one of their soft bodies, and when I looked back, it had my face sewn into its cloth head, its button eyes staring blankly ahead, and a stitched smile that was impossibly wide. I didn't stop running until I crashed through the next door and into the clothing store. The mannequins had gathered near the entrance, all of them arranged like they were waiting for something, and every single one of them was headless except one, the tallest in the center, wearing a mirror, where its face should be reflecting me once again, only I wasn't moving. This time, my reflection stood still, even as I backed away, and then it raised its hand and pointed behind me. I turned, and saw that the fitting rooms were open, every one of them pitch black. But from the farthest one came the sound of weeping, slow broken sobs like a child mourning. And I remembered. Rule 3, do not approach anyone crying, no matter how human they sound. I turned away, but the sobbing grew louder, more desperate, until it sounded like it was right behind me. I screamed and turned, but there was nothing there, just a long smear of blood leading to the mirror-masked mannequin, which now had its arms open, like it was inviting me in. I backed away slowly and made my way to the main concourse, the central area of the mall. But something was wrong. It was bigger now, wider than before, the ceiling. Higher, the walls farther apart, like the space itself was stretching. The stores lining the concourse were different too. Their signs written in languages. I couldn't read some symbols shifting, like they were alive. And then I saw them, the other workers. At least I thought they were workers, hunched figures in security uniforms, faces hidden behind masks like old-time plague doctors. They moved silently, pushing carts filled with what looked like body parts, neatly wrapped in brown paper, dripping wet. They didn't acknowledge me, just moved from store to store, disappearing into doors that shouldn't exist and reappearing from shadows that didn't make sense. I stood in the middle of it all, shaking and screaming for help, but my voice sounded muffled like I was underwater. And then the overhead speaker crackled to life, and a voice spoke in a language I didn't recognize. But somehow I understood it. Shift evaluation in progress. All violations recorded subject. Not compliant, probability of release. Decreasing. Prepare for witness phase. I didn't know what that meant, but I didn't want to find out. I ran to the elevator, the one the cleaning woman had said never to enter. But it was open now. The interior glowing with soft golden light. And inside a mirror on the back wall that didn't reflect me, but a hallway I had never seen before. One lined with doors all numbered with my birthday. I stepped inside against everything I knew was right, and the doors closed silently. The elevator didn't move, but I felt like I was falling, and when the doors opened again, I was in a room filled with hospital beds, every one of them occupied by versions of me, sleeping unmoving wires in their arms, screens, monitoring something I didn't understand, and standing at the foot of each bed was the cleaning woman. Her face different each time, but always wrong, always too still. And then all the versions of me sat up at once and screamed, and I screamed too. And everything went black. I woke up on the floor of the mall soaked in sweat and something thicker that clung to my skin like syrup. The lights above were blinking rapidly, casting strobe-like shadows across the walls, and I couldn't hear anything but my own heartbeat thudding like war drums in my ears. The clock on the wall read 5:55 a.m., and I remembered the rules, the final one. Rule 10. You will not be allowed to leave until you understand why you were chosen. And the words pulsed in my head again and again, like a countdown to something I didn't want to see. The office was gone, replaced by a long hallway that shouldn't have existed running through the mall like a spine, and I was walking it barefoot without remembering when I'd lost my shoes. And the tiles below were sticky and warm, like skin stretched tight over bone. And every step made me feel more and more like I wasn't supposed to be walking here, like I was intruding on something sacred and ancient. I saw the cleaning woman again standing at the end of the hallway, her back turned and her hands folded in front of her. Her hair was no longer grey but pitch black, her uniform no longer stained but perfectly pressed and glowing faintly with an inner light. I called out to her, but she didn't turn. She just spoke in a voice I barely recognized. You've broken the rules and obeyed them, and you still don't see, do you? And then she turned, and her face was mine. Not similar, not close. It was exactly mine, but pale and lifeless. Her eyes milky white, and her mouth stitched shut, and I stepped back as she began to walk toward me. Not quickly, not threateningly, but with purpose. Like she knew I wouldn't run, because where would I go? And when she reached me, she pressed something into my hand. It was the original sheet of rules, now burned and torn, with a new line at the bottom, written in fresh ink. Rule 11. When the shift ends, do not speak until spoken to. I blinked, and she was gone. The hallway melted away, and I stood once again at the main entrance of the mall, where I had first come in. The doors still locked, the sky outside still black, like it was 2 a.m. instead of nearly 6. And then the sound of footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, polished shoes tapping against tile. And I turned to see the mall's owner, the man I'd met briefly when I first arrived, standing calmly with a cup of coffee in one hand, his other in his coat pocket. "You made it," he said simply, like I'd finished a game or passed a test. And then he added, "Not many do, and none leave the same." I asked him what this place was, what I'd seen, what I'd lived, and he just smiled and said, "The mall shows you what you bring in. It's not haunted, it's not cursed. It's a mirror, and sometimes mirrors break." He took a sip of his coffee and looked around like everything was perfectly normal. Then he said, "I suppose you met her, the woman who gave you the rules?" And I nodded slowly, still shaking, and he frowned slightly. "That's not possible," he said, not dismissively, but almost sad. "I told you, didn't I? I don't have any woman working here, especially not a cleaner. I keep this place locked tight at night, always have, always will." He stepped past me and looked at the front door, then checked his watch. 6 o'clock on the dot. "Time to open soon, but not for you. Not today." He gestured toward the side hall, and I followed him reluctantly, my body moving slower, my legs heavier, and I realized every single part of the mall was quiet now. Not dead, just waiting, like it was listening. And we walked together down a short corridor until we came to a small door labeled storage, and he unlocked it and motioned me inside. Inside were files, thousands of them, stacked from floor to ceiling, each labeled with names and dates. I looked and found mine immediately. The folder was warm and pulsing slightly, like it was breathing, and inside were photos of me, not just from last night, but from my childhood, from school, from times I never remembered being photographed. And there were notes scribbled in a looping script. Candidate number 8127, emotionally vulnerable, financially unstable, prone to obedience, high susceptibility to influence, ideal test subject, and beneath that one final line, accepted. I dropped the folder and looked at the owner, but he just nodded. "It's not about the job, it never was. It's about the shift, the choices you make, the rules you break or follow, and the things you carry with you. And now that the shift is over, you're part of it now, not staff, not visitor, not exactly." And I asked if I could leave, and he smiled again and said, "You've already left. Once you'll leave again and come back again. It's what we all do in the end, but as you go, remember the rules, they'll follow you." And then he snapped his fingers, and I blinked, and I was standing outside in the parking lot, the morning sun blinding, and the mall doors behind me closed and silent, like none of it had ever happened. But the rules were still in my hand, burned into my skin like a tattoo. And as I walked home, people stared at me like they saw something wrong, like I wasn't quite right. And when I finally reached my apartment, everything was off the walls, covered in writing. I didn't remember scribbled messages in my own handwriting about things I hadn't seen yet, and a calendar on the fridge with today's date circled in red, and the words, "Next shift" beneath it. And then my phone rang, the same number from the ad, the same voice from before. "Shift starts tonight, 10 p.m. sharp." And before I could say anything, the line went dead, and the lights in my apartment flickered once and then again. And from the hallway outside, I heard footsteps slow and familiar, and someone sliding a new sheet of paper under my door.